Hello everyone and welcome. I do hope you're having a great day. Today I want to go through a game with you played in the year 2008 on the Internet Chess Club, also known as the ICC at the time. And it's a very accurate game from two very strong players. Emory Tate was playing with the white pieces and Danny Rensch from chess.com was playing with the black pieces. I'm not sure if this was a blitz game or it was played in a tournament, but I get the feeling maybe both players ran out of time towards the end of the game. But it's an interesting one and it's quite long, so without further ado, let's get into it. Tate began with the move e4. Rensch played the Sicilian with c5. Tate now played knight to f3, and then there was d6, d4. Takes on d4, knight takes d4, and black played knight to f6, which hits the e-pawn. And now Tate played a very rare and interesting move. He played f3, the prince variation. And I had to look this up, but basically white is securing his e-pawn with the f-pawn, and potentially it wants to play c4 next move to set up a Maroczy bind. Black played a6 in this position, and Tate did indeed play c4. White's got superb control over the centre, and this d5 square would be the perfect place to plonk a knight. So for this reason, black plays e6, hits out at the d5 square, also prepares to develop the bishop maybe to e7, and white's knight went to c3. Black did develop their bishop to e7. White played bishop to e2, and black castled. White played bishop to e3, and black played b6. So black's been super solid here. Basically sort of like a hippo where you just got all your pawns on the 6th rank. It's been very hard for white to infiltrate. But white's doing fairly well as well. They're just developing pieces. Tate castled in this position and has a very solid position themselves. So black has to develop, played bishop to b7. White played queen to e1. Black developed their knight, and Tate moved his queen over to f2 to set up a battery against this b6 pawn. Black developed their queen to c7, and white put a rook on the c-file to contest this queen. Rensch also gets his pieces active. He plays rook to c8, and now Tate starts launching pawns up the board with a4. So at the moment it's very hard for both sides to infiltrate the position. There's just a lot of manoeuvring at the moment. Black played bishop to d8, and just to show you how obvious it is that both sides can't really infiltrate, white could play b4 in this position. I believe that's the best move. If black plays knight to e5, then knight to b1 is considered the best move, and the c-pawn and all these other pawns are very, very secure, and it feels like it's going to be a very long game. Okay, so back to the game. Bishop d8 was just played, but Tate, instead of playing b4, actually played a5, sacrificing a pawn temporarily. Black takes on a5. White now plays knight to b3 because they're going to win this pawn back with interest. And for this reason, black switches the file for his rook, plays rook to b8. Inadvertently attacks the b2 pawn, and white wins their pawn back with knight takes a5, and the bishop now goes to c8, with black threatening to take on b2. White defends this with a manoeuvre, bishop to f1. The queen now protects the pawn, but now black counterattacks with knight c5, prepares to move the knight into b3. This square is protected, of course, but I don't really think white wants to trade off pieces at this moment. So for this reason, Tate plays a double purpose move. Rook to a3 protects the b3 square, but maybe white also wants to play rook to a1 at some point, doubling on the a file. Black secures their knight on c5. It's actually a great piece. But now comes knight to a2. White really wants to shift this knight away with the b4 pawn. So how is black going to stop this? Well, Rensch just goes in for a counter-attack. He plays f5, threatening to open up the position. So threatening to take on e4, because now this rook eyes up the queen on f2. Forces white to make a decision, and Tate decides the best move is just to simply take the pawn off the board, which it is. And now rook takes f5. So at least black's got some activity with this rook all of a sudden coming to life. But this doesn't stop white's main objective to shift the knight from c5. Tate plays b4, forcing the knight to move away. And actually Rensch comes up with a decent move here. Knight comes in to e4, using the threat of the open file of the rook against the queen to attack the queen with the knight. The problem with this move is though that after the queen moves, which is what Tate did, the knight is now attacked and forces it to go backwards. So all of a sudden the bar has shifted in White's favour. And why is this? I believe it's because White's got significant space advantage here, and White is threatening to play moves like c5 or b5 at some point, and these two bishops are just very well coordinated in this position. Bishops are there even. Silly arrow. Okay, so in the game, bishop d4 was now played by Tate, giving his bishop some extra squares to cover. Black jumped their knight in to e5, and here I think Tate missed quite a good advantage. He could have played the move b5 here, because after takes, White's threatening to play this move b6, and once the queen moves away to d7, White has the nice move knight to c6, and after takes, all of a sudden this rook is securing this pawn, and now White's pieces are going to jump in the position. For instance, queen e7, there's c7, bishop takes c7, and now knight to b4, threatening to play knight to c6. And this is going to be a very hard move to stop. You can try bishop to d7 in this position, but again, rook takes c7 is on the cards. You can also try rook to b7, so the knight doesn't threaten to take the rook. But you can just play knight to c6 anyway, hit the queen. Once the queen moves, this moves like rook to a8, and Black's position is quite a mess. Okay, so back to the game. Knight to e5 was just played. We just looked at White being able to play b5 here, but in the game, Tate just confidently played rook to e3, just doubling on the e file. But apparently, according to Stockfish, this loses the advantage for White after the next move, knight to f7. Obviously, White still does have a space advantage, but apparently not a significant advantage anymore. Suddenly, Black's pieces have a bit of coordination to them, you could say. However, I do like what Tate does in this game. He just keeps on relentlessly attacking Black and threatening different types of pieces. He plays bishop to d3, threatening the rook on f5. The rook goes to f4 to hit the bishop, and Tate retreats it all the way back to a1. That's actually a decent square for the bishop at the moment because it's secured by the rook, and it's just got a massive scope here all the way from a1 to h8. Knight to e5 is now played by Black, and Tate comes up with a tactic. He plays the very nice rook takes knight, sacrificing the exchange, but not really a sacrifice because after pawn takes e5, there's bishop takes, a triple fork. The queen's attacked, the rook's attacked, the rook on b8 is attacked as well. Queen a7 check is played, c5 to stop the check, and Rensch plays bishop takes a5, just going in for the complications. So now the bishop's attacked by the pawn, the rook's attacked by the bishop, this rook's attacked by the bishop. However, temporarily Black is a piece up, but now wins it back. Bishop takes f4, material is equal, but now the pawn is still attacking the bishop and the bishop still attacks the rook. There's a move to save both, bishop to c7 from Black. White definitely doesn't want to take that bishop off. Instead he plays bishop to g5, offering to destroy Black's kingside with bishop takes f6. For this reason, Black defends. Bishop d8 defends the knight, but Tate now gets his pieces into better positions. He plays very accurate rook to d1. Threatens also bishop takes h7 with this, and once the king takes or the knight takes, then either the bishop or the rook can take the bishop on d8. So Black moves it. Rensch plays accurately again, bishop to e7, but now Tate offers another threat. He plays bishop c4, hits the pawn on e6. Each move, White's just attacking and making Black work. Finally, I guess the pressure finally gave because Black goes in for this move. Bishop takes c5 with check. The point is now White takes, the queen takes with check, and Black will pick up a bishop. But after king h1, it's quite hard here. Which bishop do you take? It's quite difficult. In the game, Rensch played accurately, but if you opted for queen takes c4 here, you could be in a lot of trouble after bishop takes f6. Because if pawn takes, then white has this move. Queen to g3, it's check, and you'll pick up the rook. If queen takes a2 in this position, again, queen g3 just wins because you're attacking g7 with mate, also attacking the rook. Yes, you can play rook to b7 to save both, but now comes rook to d8 check, king f7, followed by queen g7 checkmate. So in this position, Rensch had to be incredibly accurate. He took the correct bishop, he played queen takes g5, but Tate is relentless in this game. He finds the accurate move. I think a lot of us here would take on e6, but the correct move is actually rook to d8, forcing the king to f7, and then playing a very nice tactic with rook takes c8. The point being is if rook takes c8, then queen takes e6 comes, and white will be a full piece up after taking the rook next move. Instead though, I think this is the correct thing to do. Black goes in for more complications, plays rook to b2. Black's threatening mates on g2, you never know, white could miss it. But Tate plays accurately, plays queen takes e6 check, the king is forced to g6, and now he plays bishop to d3. The king hides on h6, and queen to h3 check is played, followed by knight to h5. Now I thought when looking at this game this looks absolutely ridiculous, surely there's a mate here, but actually there's not. Black is just about holding on. And the best move in this position is actually simply knight c1, protecting your knight against the rook and moving it away. And white's just actually a full piece up in this endgame, so this is why it's so good for white. Instead though, Tate goes in for further complications. He plays g4, so threatens to take on h5 twice, and this is exactly what happens. So black goes in for this. They go for rook takes a2, queen takes h5, queen takes h5, and pawn takes h5. I don't think black wants to take on h5 in this position, because then just comes bishop takes h7. Instead, he starts pushing the pawn up the board with a5. White can actually hoover up the pawns. Tate plays rook to h8, the king takes on h5, Tate takes on h7 with check, the king moves to the side, hoovers up another pawn. The king is closer, but this should be a good win for white now. The best move in this position is actually bishop to e4 to hold on to the pawn. Even if black starts pushing his pawn up the board, you always have rook to a7. Remember, always get your rook behind the pawn in an endgame. After a3, white just about holds on here with king's g1. They can check again, but the king will eventually hide to safety. And after rook to a1, the key move here is actually rook to a4, because then you start having discovered attacks against the king. The king will be forced to move, and then the white king can infiltrate back to the centre. Okay, back to the game. Instead of bishop to e4, Tate played rook to f7 check. The king went to e3, the bishop went to b5, and black did actually start launching the pawn at the board. And this is a very brave move here. It makes me think it does actually have time trouble for both players, because it feels like Tate just bailed out here with bishop takes a4. Rook takes a4 was played, and he must have known this was a win. He went to king g2. The king for black is offside. It's going to be very hard to get it into this sort of position and stop these two pawns. Maybe Tate knew this. So rook a8 was played. White starts launching pawns. Black attacks the pawn. The king protects. It's a check. The rook goes back to h8. And now white gets a very good square for their rook. It stops the king infiltrating the position. It's going to be very hard to get the king in here. And so Rensch puts it to f2. But now the king for white marches up the board. King to g4. The king went back to e3. White checks, and the king went to d4 in the centre of the board. Rook to e4, but the king is still cut off from the protection, or trying to get to this h pawn or this f pawn. So White pushes up the pawn. There's a check thrown in. The king hides again. Rook to f8. A decent move. Hits the f3 square. White's got to be very accurate here. Rook to e3 is a good move though. Protects the pawn. The king attacks the rook once again. A check is thrown in. King to d5. And now it looks like black's done well here, because now it looks as though white's going to be forced back to e3, but the tactics are in white's favour. Tate plays h6. After rook takes f3 in the game, white just about holds on to their winning edge because they have rook to g4. To be fair, a lot of moves would have won in that position, but rook g4, the rook went to f7 for black, the king went to g5, and then the king went to e6. Rook e4 check, cuts the king off, the king goes to d5, and now Tate attacks black's rook, forcing it to move away. And now it's just a matter of technique. There's check, king went up, there's check, the king goes up. Rook a1, the pawn now goes up, and eventually black will run out of checks, as you'll see. Rook to g1, king f7, another check, and finally after king d7, black resigns because there's no more checks in this position, and white will queen the pawn. So a very interesting and tremendously well played game from both sides. It looks as though white just had a big space advantage, and eventually that just told, and black just had to go in for some complications. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please drop a like, comment or subscribe to the channel for more chess videos very soon. I'm sure they'll help improve your own game and ELO rating. Anyway, see you next time.